Hi, I'm Phil Pringle, a founder and leader of the C3 movement of churches around the world. Welcome to C3 TV's Leadership with yours truly. It's here we're going to unpackage leadership truths. Please subscribe if you haven't already, and make sure you share this with all your friends and family and associates and team. I'm believing that we will raise up many, many leaders. I have, in this session, thought deeply about the teachability and discipleship. And the two are pretty much the same. In my own world, I have found that I am the accumulation, if you like, of a variety of people who have spoken into my life. I couldn't say that in any way I'm a self-made person. I would say that other people who have had input into my world have been the making of whatever we're doing today. Sometimes those people have been my fellows, my comrades, my brothers, people I fellowship with. Sometimes it's the people I lead, speaking back into my world, giving me feedback. And at many times it's been mentors, people who have had a time of speaking into my world. And I find that mentors and coaches are generally not with you for an entire lifetime. Sometimes they pass away or they move into a different situation, and you find that over a season they were powerful mentors in your life. And I remember in the early days of my Christianity, my own pastor, obviously, Dennis Barton, he was, and his wife spoke into our world and helped us begin the life of following Jesus. But not only did he speak, he also gave us opportunities to preach and to pastor and to be involved in the team. Peter Morrow, another minister in that town, had a lot to do with our development from a very prophetic angle and guidance. As time passed, we found ourselves in Australia, and there were other people who came into our world. Ron Wallace was somebody in the early days in New Zealand who spoke into my world as I worked with him. And then when we landed in Australia, we found that there were ministers in the city of Sydney. I related to them. I would shout them for lunch. I'd say, hey, let me take you out for lunch, and then ask them what they thought about particular situations, etc. I remember flying down to Adelaide to take Andrew Evans out for lunch because he had managed to get the Assemblies of God in Australia up to 1,000 churches in just 20 years. And I thought, that's some achievement. I want to talk with him and glean from him. Well, out of that relationship, I ended up getting onto the board, the Church Growth International Board of Dr. Cho in Seoul, Korea. And so he became a mentor, a pastor into my life. And I've always found him to be immensely encouraging, unbelievable. He has always been extravagant in his encouragement, his affirmation. And I find that is the best climate and environment for any mentor to create, for them to actually say something that might be a little more pointed into your world. And so then Ed Cole, who began Christian Ministries Network, his son Paul Cole is with us now, but Ed, he was a mentor in my world. Lester Summerall, he was another mentor at a time in my life. And so I've found that all of these people have had significant parts to play in particular areas, not in the whole of life, but in some of those areas of our lives. And all of us should be able to name some people who have a complete influence in our lives, who can say whatever they want to say and can coach us and mentor us at any level. And so I find myself, even these days now, I'm 67 now, and so I'm looking still to other people to speak into my world. One of the great Bible examples is Moses with his father-in-law Jethro. But Jethro is also the priest of Midian. He's also Moses' employer. And we discover he's also Moses' counselor. So Moses, at 80 plus years of age, is still accepting advice and counsel and leadership from a mentor. And we think Moses is a mighty man of God, only God is above him. But he also had this man Jethro, who is possibly one of the most understated, uncelebrated heroes of history, in that he helped shape the life of Moses. Number one, as his father-in-law, that meant that Moses married the man's daughter. Now, it's an interesting thing in Exodus 18 where you find Moses is overwhelmed with the amount of work of counseling all the people of God. He's just counseling one after the other. And it says Jethro came back with Moses' wife and their children. Now, something's gone wrong here. Moses has been so caught up with the ministry, his wife has left him and gone back to her father. And it seems like Dad's not happy. He says, no, you got to go back to Moses. And so he brings the wife of Moses back to Moses, and he reconciles them. They're back together. Then he looks at what Moses is doing, and Moses says, well, I'm doing the Lord's work. I'm guiding and pastoring and looking after all these people. And Jethro says, what you do is not good. So that's a pretty interesting comment for a mentor to say, because Moses thought what he was doing was good. And Jethro said, no, this is not good. You're going to die doing this. You're wearing yourself out. So he gave him some counsel, and that was one of Moses' greatest lessons in learning delegation. And so even at the age of 80, a smart leader keeps themselves humble and keeps reaching out for counsel and guidance and allowing people to speak into their world and bring them into all kinds of new territory that they wouldn't get to without that mentor. That's how God has arranged our lives, so that we are taken further forward and we are taken higher in life by others. So we've got to get ourselves into the place where other people who can help us in our particular calling and area are having an influence on our lives. So once we acknowledge we're not that smart in an area, that means we're smart. And that's an interesting oxymoron almost. It's ironic. The book of Proverbs says, he who is wise in his own eyes is a fool. And that's called conceit. And so the person who is wise in their own eyes is not wise. But the person who consider themselves not wise in their own eyes is wise. So wisdom is not a body of knowledge that we have in our brain. Wisdom is an attitude of the heart where we say, you know what, I'm not that smart to know how to make all this happen. And if we were, everything that we thought we could do, we would be doing it. We would be changing the world. But up until now, nobody quite is doing that in the church. And so we've got to take nations and change the world. And we need the influence of the voice of God coming to us through other people to help us get there. Number two, we should never stop learning. The ability to learn is within us. And if we hang out with the right people, they'll help us hear our own voice. When we first came to Sydney, we went through a lot of trials landing here. It was like the most full-on opposition and warfare I'd ever experienced. And I got into such a place of confusion and doubt. I went to see another minister in the city who I genuinely respected and looked to. And I sat down with him and I said, what do you think we should do? And he said, well, what do you think God has spoken to you about? I said, God has told us to start a church in Sydney. And he says, so what do you think you should do? I said, I guess we should stay and start a church in Sydney. And he said, I guess that's right. And I thought, I've referred back to that many times thinking, that was such a smart piece of counseling. He didn't tell us what to do. He just surfaced in me what I already knew by asking the right kind of questions. And when we are in the company of a person who's empathetic, our own counsel will convince us. In fact, there is a proverb that says, counsel lies deep in the heart of man, but a man of understanding will draw it out. So when you're in the space where somebody who is empathetic, as I said, and understanding, you will find your answers are in your heart. That's what great mentoring can do. Yet on the other hand, there's also places where we're completely blind to areas in our lives. We have blind spots and we need somebody to be the eyes for our lives. Number 3, a leader is always in a teachable attitude, not only towards other people, but towards life and towards as many influences as we can find around us, especially in the world of books. They are a treasure beyond description. And we should be reading the minds of other great people in the history of the world again and again and again. And I make sure that I'm not just reading material that only confines me to my particular world of operation. I want to know how business operates. I want to know the lives of great heroes of history. I don't know how many books on Churchill I've read as one of the greatest leaders of all time. I've read many books on national leaders, presidents, prime ministers, and then on business leaders. I've read a whole lot more books on those, the leaders of the new age, of the new age of technology, the Bill Gates story, the Amazon story, the Google story, the Nike story. All of these are able to tell us how leaders have done it in their particular world. The Stephen Jobs story. And then in the financial world, I've read a lot of material of business leaders like Jack Welch, like Warren Buffett, and others who are very clever in managing finances and in managing organizations. And so we can learn a lot. I realize these are all a lot of secular books that I've referred to. I do not think that we should just commit ourselves just to Christian material, although I read a lot of material out of those books as well. I would try to glean from those books voices that are current in the world today that God is using to speak to us, plus the classics, and plus all great historical writings. People like Edward Gibbon, he's a great writer, and Shakespeare. Any of these people who are acclaimed in history as having skills, they develop your mind to think in particularly perceptive ways. If you are able to see what they saw and how they thought about situations and their perspectives on life, then that helps your brain to become an information processing machine that's high caliber. And you can learn also by reading those books from other people's mistakes. That's the best way in the world to learn, because you're not going to have time to make all the mistakes that you need to make to learn all the lessons we need to learn. So learning from what other people did that was a mess up, we can say, let's not do that ourselves. I think it's a good idea to distill each book that we read into 2, 3, 4, maximum 10 great points that we got out of that book. Sometimes it might only be one, but we need to tell ourselves, what did I get from this teacher? Books are amazing because it means I can sit down with the greatest minds in the world, the greatest minds in history, and they can talk to me. I would say that at the beginning of my Christian life and leadership, books like Smith Wigglesworth, Apostle of Faith, became such a powerful source of faith for me. I read every book I could on faith and all of Smith Wigglesworth's books. And it was like his hand came out through the pages and laid on me faith and put a faith on the inside of me. It was like a gift came to me through that book. The power of great books cannot be underestimated. Keep yourself on a system of reading books all the time, whether you're halfway through one or reading 2 or 3 at the same time. Stay on top of getting taught by these teachers that are in our lives. Discipleship is an amazing calling on every one of us. And the word disciple means to learn. It actually means to learn by doing. But if we are not a learner, we're not a disciple. A disciple is essentially a learner. So as I develop the art of learning new skills, new ways new cultures into my life, I will be a true disciple of Christ. And that puts me in place for being a leader. A good leader is at the same time a great student. Everyone needs to continue to grow. Remaining teachable and searching for ways to continually improve is the sign of any great leader. Learning from a mentor or from other people's mistakes can save you the pain of making them yourself. Whether it's one of many, someone you may know, or through books, everyone needs other leaders.